Good evening, National Readers. Good evening. It's 4:00. I feel like it's actually still afternoon. Good afternoon, National Readers. I was tricked by how dark and grey and rainy it was outside. Anyway, we are now about a week into the summer election, and it's all been very busy. And I think we all already feel like we've been doing this for 6 weeks and kind of wanting it to be over a little bit already. I'm joined by Xander and Hamish, who are two of our political reporters. Xander is also one of our content editors at The National. And we thought that we would get together to discuss what the hell has been going on in the past week. Are we going to be drafted to go to war? What is going to happen? So, Hamish, I'll let you kind of fill us in on the national service situation, since we were discussing that just before we went live there.
Yeah, so Rishi Sunak wants all young people to go and do national service, which would be a jolly good idea for getting the. I think it's a good idea for getting the Tory vote out. I think almost all that we've seen from Douglas Ross speaking in Perth today was literally begging people to come out and vote. Rishi Sunak has said, yeah, we're going to put those horrible young people into the army and, beat them into shape. And we've got, we've got the quadruple lock on pensions. Pensions will never be taxed as well. These aren't really policies that you put out to win an election campaign. They're ones to make sure that you're not completely destroyed at the election. I think that's fair to say that these are things that older Tory voters in England and potentially in parts of Scotland as well might motivate them to actually get out the house on the 4th of July and vote, whereas they might have been inclined to stay at home before.
I can understand that. I mean, it seems like when I was younger, I remember older people in my family talking about we need to be sending those young people out on national service, and older relatives who I think had maybe done a form of national service at the time felt very strongly that everybody should do that. But I've been one of those people in my life who thinks everyone should do like national service, but in the hospitality or retail sector, because I think that could really make you grow as a person, and it will just make you a bit more patient and kind to other humans that you interact with in your life. Anyway, I'm not running to be Prime Minister, so that's not important. But Xander, you were out doing Vox Pops yesterday, and I was actually just going to play them just now so that we could get a bit of a sense of what the people of Glasgow felt about the national service policy.
It's fucking bollocks, mate. It's so stupid. Yeah, like who's going to want to do that? You're not going to get any votes from anyone under the age of 25. I mean, they weren't going to get any votes from people under the age of 25 anyway, but it's not going to help.
I'm Spanish, so it seems very like to what our dictator was implementing, like when my parents and they had to do the army service and all this. It's very going back in time.
I don't want to die for Rishi Sunak, to be honest. I don't think any 18-year-old in the country wants to do that. Their sort of base that are going to reform, they've wanted to see that back for a long time because, well, they're over 50 and they won't have to do it. They sort of think the under 25s are all these woke, sort of non-binary wimps, yet they want an army of them. Yeah. It doesn't make sense to me.
I would think it sounds like a good idea, but I don't think it's going to be a popular one, but I suppose it would give youngsters something to do, instead of hanging about all the time.
Well, why would you want to put people in to the national service? Why would you want to do that? And then they're saying that there's not going to be any legal repercussions, but it's going to be made mandatory. So, as we were discussing it this morning on the TV, how are you going to put that forward? I didn't have an answer.
So those were really interesting Vox Pops, Sandra. So you felt that people were largely not that supportive?
No, the vast majority of people were not supportive. The support that there was coming from the older generations, as Hamish has noted. It's definitely more of an appeal to older people, I think. But two things. One, it can be very hard to vox pop people on the streets. It can be quite difficult. People often think that maybe you're like after their money or something, when actually you just want their opinions. It can be quite difficult to get them to stop, to get them to engage with whatever the topic might be. That was not the case for national service, but everybody had an opinion on it. Even people that didn't want to go on camera wanted to speak about it for a couple of minutes, tell me what they were thinking. Everybody had an opinion on this, which in terms of policy launches is pretty successful. I mean, I imagine Keir Starmer would want everyone in the country to have an opinion on his newest policy, whatever it is. Another thing that really I think came across, especially from young people, is like Rishi Sunak. I mean, we've seen him in the last couple of days saying national service, it will create a culture of service. Where's that culture of service from the Tory government? Like, if they want to have a culture of service among people in the UK, then they should be leading by example and serving the population. But they're stripping back public services across the board. And then their solution is to have young people serve them. It has to be a two-way street. And as far as I can tell, the Conservatives want everyone working for them. Well, yeah, that's what it is.
Safe to say you're not a fan.
Yeah,
no.
very passionate.
Although, ironically enough, I'm not wholly against national service as an idea. I just think this is a stupid policy presented in a way that makes no sense. They haven't even answered the most basic questions. Like, if you actually want national service, look at using the infrastructure you have in place to implement it. We already have schooling up until age 16. Why would you then have a 2-year gap when someone can leave school, become whatever it might be? Just one of my mates from school jumped into my head. He left at 16 and went and did an apprenticeship, and now he's like a window builder. He literally builds windows. He's done that for 2 years, become an expert in it. And at 18, he has to quit his job in order to join the army. It makes zero sense. Zero sense.
I think also I'm not against it as an idea either, in like theory, but I think the idea that the people who brought you Brexit and levelling up, like, that this is going to go smoothly and like it's all just going to work perfectly. And like you say, yeah, I mean, we don't have a particularly strong culture in this country of people feeling like the state is looking after them, and so then they have some responsibility back to it. So it would just be like this kind of slightly hostile state saying, "Well, you need to go into the army." And there was a great opinion piece in the Telegraph today that it would be young people's payback for furlough. Most people who would have to do this then get furloughed because they were not going to school because of the pandemic.
They were.
Yeah, they were being taught via video links.
Oh my gosh.
Young people as well, like people who weren't in school, the young ones, for like 18 to sort of 25, they were the ones being forced back into working in the hospitality sector when everyone was getting sick. Like, they were the ones doing the service then, way too soon. Oh my God, crazy.
It's like if you want people in the NHS, if you want people in the army, make the wages good, make it an attractive place to work. If you want people in the care sector to stay in the care sector, make it an attractive sector to work in. Don't blame people for not wanting to work in these jobs that you're making so unattractive. Like, it's incredible what not just the Tories but Labour as well are able to find funding for. Like, when it comes to nurses' pay rises or teachers' pay rises or anything in the public sector, there's no money, nothing. And then suddenly they can magic up 6 billion by cracking down on tax avoidance. That's where the Tories are saying they're going to fund their 2.5 billion national service and their 2.5 billion pension pledge, and that leaves them $1 billion to pledge something else in the coming days. Why haven't they done that in the last 14 years? If you can get 6 billion every year magically by cracking down on tax avoidance, what have they been doing for the past 14 years? And I think that's why this isn't going to wash. This is not going to wash for the general election. The Tories have had too long.
It also rather begs the question of why have you let such an enormous tax avoidance go on under your watch?
Yeah.
14 years. If that is, to drum up that amount of money from it, but you kind of leave yourself open to other questions there.
All the other times they said there was no money, and why were they not going after the tax avoidance then?
Yeah, it seems like they were really sleeping on that problem.
Yeah, something you could have done at any point when there was no money, at any point in the last 14 years, but you haven't. So why do we believe that you're going to do it now? Honestly, at least the Tories in London have got a policy or two. In Scotland, their policy is sack Michael Matheson, which isn't got anything to do with Westminster.
Xander,
it's the
this is
whole
a
thing.
wonderful segue because I was just about to share the video from yesterday when our wonderful colleague Steph was on the campaign trail in Falkirk with Douglas Ross, and she used the opportunity of him standing in front of the Kelpies to ask what I think was a pretty great question. Did he answer it? Let's watch and find out.
So, Mr. Ross, we're at the Kelpies today, iconic venue, but with Rishi Sunak having approval ratings of -43 according to a recent poll, is it possible you've backed the wrong horse?
Well, if we're speaking about polling, we're here in Falkirk West, which is Michael Matheson's constituency, where the vast majority of people across Scotland believe he should resign. But instead of doing the right thing, John Swinney is backing his friend who claimed £11,000 when he shouldn't, who then lied about it, who's been found guilty by the Scottish Parliament Committee and is still in post. In any other line of work, Michael Matheson would have been sacked by now, but the SNP haven't even suspended him from the party. So we're here in Falkirk West saying that Michael Matheson should finally do the right thing and resign, and John Swinney should do the right thing and accept that his friend has failed the Scottish Parliament and he should no longer be backing Michael Matheson defending the indefensible.
So, just to remind you, at the start of that, we were asking Douglas Ross how he felt about the Prime Minister's approval ratings. Somehow, the answer was something about Michael Matheson. I've seen that he's been talking more about Michael Matheson today. There's some information probably coming out tomorrow with the Scottish Tory campaign and more Michael Matheson stuff.
Is there a vote on the motion to fire Matheson? I think that's coming to Parliament tomorrow, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I've not really heard what the Scottish Conservatives are pledging as part of this election campaign, other than apparently they're going to sack Michael Matheson, or I don't know. They're not even really saying that they'll do that. How would they do that from Westminster? I don't understand this at all.
The UK Parliament is sovereign. Like maybe an act of legislation passed at Westminster, I guess it would be able to pass remove an MSP. But there's currently no way to remove a sitting MSP apart from their resignation. Obviously, Matheson's been pretty intransigent, and the Tories have obviously gone into their focus groups. They've asked all the voters for the issues, the policies that cut through, and found that Matheson cuts through more than any others. It's the only explanation for this, because it's meant to be a general election campaign, but we're just hearing more and more and more about Matheson's mistakes, which I don't think there's really any doubt that they are mistakes. I don't think there's any doubt, even among the SNP, Keith Brown over the weekend saying he made mistakes, he should be punished. The only real debate is what the punishment should be. Ross is banging a drum because he doesn't want to talk about Tory policy, which is understandable.
I think rather than cutting through, maybe what it, because Labour's narrative in England of we've had 14 years of Tory government, we need them out, and they point to the sort of scandal and sleaze. I think that the Scottish Tories think that they can kind of employ that in Scotland in the opposite direction. And I think what's interesting is that the Scottish Tories, Scotland is one of the areas where the Tories are predicted to sort of hold, their Tory vote is predicted to hold up. Although we did have Douglas Ross in Perth today literally begging people to come out. So I don't know how confident they are about that, but it does seem like the polls are bearing that out at the moment. They might hold on to the seats that they've got in Scotland.
When you say literally begging, there is an image in my mind of Douglas Ross sort of crawling around in Perth, like actually begging people. So can you?
I do believe that he was upright when he delivered the speech.
Okay.
So he wasn't, wasn't on his hands and knees begging, but he was.
Okay.
And he wanted them to deliver a fatal blow to the SNP. I think for the Scottish Tories, this election is very much about punish the SNP basically for those voters in those kind of seats.
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, Lucy, another one of our colleagues, she's been out with the Scottish Greens this afternoon. I actually haven't spoken to her since she got back from their campaign event, so I'm not 100% sure what they were focusing on. But I did see a release come into my inbox earlier with the Greens saying that the SNP couldn't be trusted on the climate. And I did want to discuss this a little because I've seen quite a lot of this coming from Stephen Flynn over the past couple of days. And Stephen Flynn is really going hard against Labour's plans for North Sea oil and gas. He's really saying that it's going to be this cliff edge that's going to result in, I think he's saying, is it 100,000 job losses that he keeps running
That's what
with?
he said today, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting case because it's so different from where we were like a couple of years ago with the SNP, with Nicola Sturgeon really saying that we shouldn't have any new oil and gas licenses. So what do you think the objective is here from the SNP, Xander, with this sort of oil and gas messaging?
They're just trying to, as Hamish said, the Tories vote is looking like it's going to hold up in seats where it's Tories versus the SNP in Scotland. Obviously, the northeast is a really key area where it's Tories versus the SNP. If the SNP hand the Tories a stick with which to beat them, like that's what it would be essentially if they come out and say no more oil and gas exploration or whatever it might be. That's the Tories are going to capitalise on that and accept exactly the same way that the Tories and the SNP are both attacking Labour with it now. I mean, the figures, 100,000 lost jobs. I haven't looked too deeply into them. It seems like it's not taking into account the jobs that presumably would be coming in to replace those.
Well, the issue is that there aren't enough renewable jobs being created. So Unite are running a big campaign about this. The trade union Unite are running a big campaign where I think they want something in the region of £6 billion committed by Labour. And they're putting, I mean, they're think Labour's largest single funder, if not one of. And they are trying to exert quite a bit of influence on Keir Starmer to kind of make pledges about that phrase, just transition, but they're asking for kind of concrete detail on it as well. And they represent a lot of oil and gas workers as well. So I think it's kind of sensible territory for the SNP to be on, particularly when they're looking at losing lots of seats in the central belt of Scotland, particularly on the west coast, and it wouldn't be a stupid idea for them to try and shore up their vote in places like Aberdeen in the northeast and the Highlands, where oil and gas for a lot of people in Glasgow and the west coast is a kind of abstract concern that happens in a different part of the country. And if the SNP say, right, okay, well, we can write off a lot of the west coast, let's focus on these areas where we can keep these seats and win, it completely sensible thing to do, to focus on that, I think.
I think
we've
seen a lot.
Of course, that's Stephen Flynn's constituency as well, Aberdeen South. So if he's seen to speak very vocally in favour of the oil and gas industry, then that could certainly help shore up his support, because some of the polls are suggesting that Labour could take his seat up there as well. So I'm sure people living in the northeast will be annoyed that I just said up there. I was showing my central belt bias, and I can sincerely apologise. Speaking of the northeast, yesterday was Alba were doing an event in Dundee. They were launching 2 of their candidates for the 2 Dundee seats. What have we heard from Alba's campaign so far? What's coming out of their camp? Any interesting policies or events?
They want to make this the Independence Day election. Alex Salmond has drawn the parallel with America's Independence Day and wants to make it Scotland's Independence Day, which sounds awfully like the de facto referendum, which I can't quite remember if they were pro.
Yeah, I think Alba's policy is now de facto referendums from here on out. Basically, any election at which the majority of votes are cast for pro-independence parties counts as a referendum result. I think that's their policy. The last I saw of it, that's definitely the one that Ash Reagan was proposing when he was trying to get Hunt Yousaf to obviously concede some things in order for her support in that no confidence vote that never ultimately happened. Definitely, the people in Alpa that I've spoken to, I'm hearing a lot about making it an independence election as well. Like, I think there's some realism that they're probably not going to win a huge number of seats, so maybe some optimism that they might win one. But it seems very much that it doesn't. The people on the ground are saying it doesn't necessarily matter so much the victory. It's more about using the campaign, using the opportunity to spread the word, get the independence message out. Like, it's a time when people are listening to political messaging, so they really want to capitalize on that. Again, as Hamish said, it's really, I think the July 4th thing is a bit of a gift to that independence messaging, so they can really hammer it home because it's such a famous date. So that's very much what I've been hearing coming from Alpa.
Yeah, and it's been their position for a long time. I remember interviewing Alex Salmond about this last year, and he said he wouldn't put a bet on keeping his two MPs until he'd seen the odds. I don't know if the odds are out yet. We can ask him again, perhaps. But he loves a bet, Alex Salmond, but he wouldn't put a bet on Neil Hanvey and Kenny McCaskill retaining their seats. And they were saying that the focus for them is much more on the Holyrood Parliament elections in 2026 in 2 years' time. So it would be interesting to see if they can build up any kind of momentum in the run up to the next Holyrood election from this, or if they will lose those two seats and lose the momentum.
Yes, well, we shall see. So I'm gonna move us on to our final topic, which was actually the first thing in the title of this video, which was Anna Sarwar. So yeah, me and Xander, we were both working on Sunday, and so this was a pretty sizable story, and it's kind of just been rolling on since then. So do you want to give us the background, Xander?
So Anna Sarwar's family company, United Wholesale (brackets Scotland), about 7 years ago were really, really in the media because they weren't paying the real living wage. Sarwar, at the time, amid the kind of political storm, gave up his own shares. His wife still has quite a lot. At the time, Sarwar was reported to have £4.8 million worth of shares in United Wholesale Scotland. Whether or not his wife now has that 4.8 million, I'm not 100% clear, to be honest with you. The Herald reported last year that she'd been taking around 40,000 in dividends each year from the company. So they're still very, very closely linked to the company. On Sunday, Sarwar was touting Labour's New Deal for working people, saying how it would force all the companies in the UK to pay the real living wage. That's £12 an hour. The real living wage is higher if you're in London, like £13.15 or something. It's only about 56p more than what the government have kind of a bit sleekly called the national living wage, which is really just the minimum wage by another name. That's £11.44. So Sarwar was asked, are your family firm currently paying the real living wage, which you want all firms to pay, or are they paying the national living wage? See, there's a lot of terms that gets confused. The minimum wage is what it should be called, the minimum wage or the real living wage. He said that they were on the minimum wage, not the real living wage, which obviously led to quite a lot of backlash. There was an awful lot of criticism of Sarwar for that. But then on Monday, the union Usdaw came out and said that actually they were paying the real living wage as of the last pay negotiations. So I'm not 100% clear on what the real picture is, to be honest. I mean, if that's what Usdaw are saying, I guess that's the truth.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a bit confusing, isn't it? That he goes on TV one day and says this thing which is kind of damaging to the firm, and then the next day the firm are basically saying that that's not the case at all. So it's an interesting one to keep an eye on. I think there might be more coming on this one.
It's a good thing that they're unlikely to sue him for defamation, isn't it?
Yeah,
very solid ground.
Yeah. Well, 7 years ago, when Sarwar gave up his shares in the company, at least made a show of giving them up. I'm sure he'll be able to get them back when he's not in politics anymore. Then he did say that United Wholesale were moving towards paying everyone the real living wage, which, I mean, if that took 6.5 years, then that's not a rapid move. It would be interesting to know when they did start paying the real living wage, assuming that they do now pay the real living wage. Because obviously, yeah, there is a massive difference between that happening 7 years ago when Sarwar said it was going to happen and that happening last month. So there are questions.
For sure. Well, we're going to spend the rest of the week working on a whole bunch of different stories that we've got going on in the background. We'll be at lots more campaigning events. I don't know where, to be honest. It's kind of a wake up and see where you're going to go situation.
Yeah, they're all over. There's literally like an event with each party each day at the moment. It's wild.
And it's going to be another 5 weeks of that.
Yeah.
Well, Hamish here kind of has it easy because he's still in Westminster, but there's nothing happening at Westminster. So we can't send him to any campaigning events in Scotland, but he also doesn't have to do anything in Westminster. So, it kind of seems like the ideal situation to be in.
I'm kicking my heels. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to getting on the campaign trail at some point. But there are no MPs as of Thursday, and Parliament's officially dissolved. On Thursday, there will be no MPs, which is always a fun period.
Well, we're happy to have you back, and all help is very welcome at the moment. There's just so much going on. So we will probably give you a few more regular updates if you enjoy watching these. Someone said that we need to take our vitamins. That's very nice advice. Thank you very much.
Why? What does that mean?
It's just to keep us sprightly on the campaign trail.
Okay.
I think that's really kind advice compared to some of the things that people message us. So I'm very grateful for recommending that we take our vitamins. Though it made me completely forget what I was saying. So I'll probably just have to swiftly move on. But yes, stay tuned. We've got lots coming up this week, and we'll have more video content for you. We'll be at all the campaign events. Get in touch with us via our send us your news function on the website. If you have anything that you're wanting us to ask any particular candidates while we're out and about, we're coming across everybody. Whether they want us to or not, I suppose. I know we've not been getting very many invitations through from Labour. You'll be shocked to hear. But I think that we will be able to attend some of their events. So stay tuned to the website, and also remember to pick up a copy of the paper. And we will see you all soon. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks.